ways of slavery, of discrimination, of exclusivity, precisely because we have realized that as humans, we are moving towards a more civilized society that respects not only of humans, but also the civilization by which we treat every single species out there. What are the issues of this debate? Firstly, do these near human beings deserve rights? But second, where are rights really based from, Madam Speaker? Let's move to the first. Because they tell us that we must maintain dominance because when they evolve, they will most probably take over and control. This is the argument of natural selection. You have three responses to this. Firstly, maybe in the past times, in the crusades and the invasion, this was possible, right? But you have to realize that current frameworks in status quo already equalize rights. Meaning, they have to participate in our working frameworks and laws before they could actually do this dominance, whatever control paradigm that they were willing to see. What is the point? The point, Madam Speaker, is if they go against society, they will most probably be imprisoned. Or maybe, Madam Speaker, they will have necessary punishments for their naive actions. Secondly, this argument only assumes that species are capable of only pure evil. Never did they argue why we think, what if it works, Madam Speaker? What if biodiversity works? Which we argued is something that is worth it, Madam Speaker, but I'll talk to that later on the second issue. But what's the point of this rebuttal? We think, Madam Speaker, we're already crystal balling the value of these species' intelligence without necessarily allowing them to have this intelligence to begin with. It presupposes that all intelligence could do is to be greedy, Madam Speaker, which we already told you is also likely not to be greedy, or it's also likely to be good, or to achieve good values, Madam Speaker. Right? We think, Madam Speaker, species are not only capable of pure evil, they're also capable of good. Thirdly, I'll take your point later in my second issue. Okay. Third, they say that power struggles is natural. We say, Madam Speaker, the value of power struggles can never be also branded as also bad. Why? Precisely because the value of power struggles can be something good. Like, for instance, this debate is already a discourse, a power struggle between the intelligence of two distinct human beings. The point is simple. There are a lot of possibilities by which we can take intelligence to the next level. Meaning, what should we therefore do? We should wait until these individuals gain their sentience and their individuality, and let's educate them properly, Madam Speaker, and tell them the right things to do in status quo. But let's assume, sit down, I'm not into my second issue. Let's say that, well, they will have a barbaric superiority, Madam Speaker, right? Because this is their argument about when we highlight the difference, which worsens conflicts, Madam Speaker, which is very naive, coming from the Deputy Prime Minister. This assumes we will always fight, and other species will always fight, Madam Speaker. Sure enough, it might create a bloody history. We might assume but not concede that it will create a bloody history, which you told me it's not likely in this age. But let's assume, right, that it will create that bloody history. Madam Speaker, you have to realize that maybe there will be conflicts on the way of gaining intelligence for these sentient animals, Madam Speaker. But you have to realize we have come to a time where we have discovered diplomacy, Madam Speaker. Meaning, we have abolished our barbarian ways of fighting. Maybe there will be some minute conflicts, maybe some minute wars against these species. But there will come a time when we have agreed and consolidated among each other, Madam Speaker, where we will abhor these conflicts, Madam Speaker, when we have come into a consensus. The point is simple. A, we already abhor conflict in status quo, meaning it's not likely possible that it will happen in this age. But secondly, Madam Speaker, even if it does happen, we will still have diplomacy in the end, a consensus created by species. Right? That's the point of all these diplomacy debates, whatever, Madam Speaker. Right? I think that could be assumed from education. Yes.
If after thousands of years, we've yet to remove this disease called greed and we're still imperfect beings, what would you want more of these imperfect beings, especially if you have the alternative to stop?
Because we are imperfect, Madam Speaker, we cannot absolutely judge the value of anything, Madam Speaker. Meaning that there are a lot of possibilities out there with our imperfection. Let's move to the second issue. Because they say, I keep hearing this very, very powerful argument that dolphins are not autistic people. They are not humans, Madam Speaker. Right? There's this automatic exclusion coming from government which they never analyzed to begin with. We already told you, coming from my second speaker, which has never responded by the way, was that the reason why he used greed as an analysis is because it is an analysis of human values. Meaning, even the standards of being human society in Madam Speaker, right? We think we should not automatically exclude these beings. Second response, we think, Madam Speaker, if it is completely that we are human, then we should abolish all animal rights therefore. But they say this, that they say that the purpose of animal rights is purely utilitarian. If you think about it, Madam Speaker, what's so utilitarian about the state funding the survival of endangered animals? If you were to think about it in a utilitarian perspective, endangered animals don't have a purpose in society. Let's just allow them to die in society, probably because they have already outcasted themselves from the ecosystem. They are completely purposeless. But they might say, right, this is for the enjoyment of all individuals, Madam Speaker, it still has utilitarian value. What am I trying to prove, Madam Speaker? You see, even utility is in concept arbitrary. There are different utilities between individuals. What might be utility for me, maybe might not be utility for another individual. A utilitarian sideline government may not find dolphins to exist as humans, but we as opposition may see them as having utilitarian value. What does this prove? Meaning, Madam Speaker, utility has various possibilities. If you realize in my second speaker's argument, when he's talking about the possibility of adding discourse, adding the possible intelligences of individuals in status quo, right? We tell you, Madam Speaker, we should look at intelligence not for its crystal ball value or its worst value, Madam Speaker, but we should look at intelligence as impartial. We should look at intelligence as merely
This debate is essentially about two very simple ideas. It's about survival and it's about maintaining dominance of man. The Prime Minister's debate is simple, right? Three things to be clarified before we move into the details. Number one, when we talk about other species, to be fair to everyone, we're talking about anything with regards to animals. We're not going to be talking about aliens. That was a different motion, guys, right? Secondly, we talk about developing intelligence or developing humans. It means the increment from a scale of 0 going up of intellectual capacity and improvement that's capable of challenging human intellect and take over at one point in time. Because naturally that's what we do. We get smarter and we take over. That's what we do as human beings. Thirdly, what we mean by suppressing the evolution is of twofold. Number one, we feel genetic modification is very much important in this debate, especially the fact that you can remove dominant traits from the DNA, especially the allele, right? So it's not passed over to the next generation. That way you ensure genetically and biologically these species will never pass over the gene of any form of dominant trait to ensure that our species will go into extinction. The second thing that we will defend with all our heart is that we will kill it. We will kill it and ensure that these particular animals or species will never come to a sentient moment when they can challenge it, right? But before that, let's explain what sentience means. We feel when a being, with animal or human being, especially what we've experienced, sentient beings are things or a state of mind where a person like you and me can have the capability to rationalize, to feel, to express, and at the same time, this makes you a human being. We are Homo sapiens. I don't know whether you will defend Homo or Phenos, but whatever the name is, we don't want it to be equal, right? Now let's look at status quo. Number one, we coexist, but we're not equal. We are human beings. We let animals live because we use them, similar to how we eat chicken, similar to how we eat cattle, similar to how we use dolphins in zoos or aquariums. The fact of the matter is this, the coexistence isn't because we're equal, but because we use them for our own benefit. That shows innate nature of dominance. Secondly, in status quo, what happens is that we naturally suppress any other species that could be dominant and take over control. For example, animals that are carnivores, lions, tigers, anything that can kill us, we put in zoos, we put in cages, we keep them in areas where they cannot attack us. The reason for that is because we want to ensure that we're in control of how they react and how they behave around us. This all screams a zero-sum game. It's either us or them. Hopefully the case setup is as clear as my spectacles, right? Three things I want to talk about. Number one, survival of the dominant. Number two, is this morally justified? And lastly, we're talking about the struggle of power. Any clarification you need? No. Let's look at the first part, survival of the dominant. Basically, survival of the fittest. This is Darwinism, right? We talked about it when he was a Beagle Boy. He said that evolution happens when a particular species decides to take over other species and exert their dominance over any other creature at that point in time. Now this is extremely important, right? We're not talking about religion, we're talking about the nature of human beings. This is also evolution. The fact that a species can evolve in its mindset to go from one point of being the same as every other species and then take control over the rest of the species around the world or in the globe, that shows the evolution of man's capability to think. And that's extremely important because that's how we've maintained our existence throughout time. This is obviously something that happened about 200 years ago, but this natural selection as a process is a concept that has existed throughout billions of years, and that's how animals have evolved from the past. Now, if you look at the zero-sum game, how have we done this so far with regards to the survival of this dominance, right? Well, two things. Number one, we've created social structures and we've been innovative enough to wrestle control away from other species. Now, this is basically what happens in reality. You wrestle the control, you create social structures. That's the difference between you and me and a cow. The fact that a cow can't create a social structure shows that you come to a position in your life that you can control other supposedly dominant beings that's out there. Secondly, the other way we've done it is that we've confined these other species to, for example, to the wilderness or to the zoo. You keep them as lack of innovative, there's no innovation at all because you put them in an environment where they cannot innovate. And this is how we've consistently ensured our dominance. And this, we from science will blatantly say is good and right if you're willing to defend it. Second idea I want to talk about is this morally justified? We think it's morally justified because this is a preventive policy. This is a policy that can ensure that we don't have to justify 100 years from now or 50 years from now killing another Homo dolphino who is the same as you, who have rights at that point in time, who've achieved that moment of sentience, who is now equal to you. You can't tell them then, at that point in time, you are not the same, we're going to get rid of you. At that point in time, it's too late. That's why it's morally justified to do it now, because if you want to do it later, you will be killing another fellow human being in brackets, yeah? Go ahead, sir.
Okay, sir, so what if a person has cerebral palsy or all other genetic disorders that makes them less human? Can we then kill them?
Look, we're not talking about human beings, right? These genetic disorders still make them human beings. If you are autistic, or if you have Down syndrome for that matter, that doesn't make you less of a human. It makes you a human that's different from others, who are still human beings. But you can't compare an autistic child to a rhinoceros. Don't skew the tail, right? It's two different things. Don't have much enough. These are animals, and these are humans. He is autistic to me sometimes, that doesn't necessarily mean he's a cow. It's two different species. You have to see the difference there. I know what you guys are doing. Lastly, right, the struggle of power is extremely important, right? We equally live among each other, but we don't equally live amongst each other. We have different species and it's classic pattern of the apes, right? There's a struggle for dominance. You give them the opportunity to rise up and be dominant compared to before, there will be a struggle of power. Imagine this, a world where there is one singular species, there is this much destruction already happening to the globe and amongst each other. Because within us, there is a struggle of power. Imagine two species coming together, fighting for dominance. Of course, you must say, what makes you think we're going to fight? But that's the nature of sentient beings. They want to be in control. They want to be in power. That's why the struggle of power isn't a human concept or social construct, but the natural instinct of human beings to behave in a manner that dictates another being's life. That's what we do to animals. That's what we do to chickens. That's what we do to cows. We put them in a position that they can never challenge us. Madam Chair, one thing is simply put. This is a zero-sum game. We're willing to take measures to ensure I live and my children are not the same as cows.
Human being is so completely arbitrary. For all you know, I could be a human being stuck in another animal's body. We think that is entirely possible, especially given the fact that we've tried time and time again to separate what it is that exactly makes us human. And the results? We failed. Hitler tried to do it with saying that we are the Aryan race. We failed. We tried to say, well, maybe it's because it's true to our religion. We failed in that too. We already agreed upon that the differences in ideologies is not necessarily reality, right? In the same way that the difference in physical characteristics is not a good enough reason to not allocate rights. We think inside opposition that we agree. We want to benefit the entirety of humanity, but we must also be inclusive to those who fall within the characteristic of humanity. Which means that I'm going to argue in my speech later on that these beings that have the capacity to display human intelligence is considered a human being. But before that, what exactly do we want? We we want to get there as much as possible, as quickly as possible, to in fact get the benefits that accrue to them. And when they reach human intelligence, this is how we will treat them. In the normal expansion of their intelligence, they have to go through the legislative and the courts in order to provide for their own rights. But if they can't use it, maybe they're not as intelligent as now, but they display the capacity to do so, then we allocate them the same rights as infants. They have the right to not be medically tested, not become food, to not be abused. The same rights that we allocate to chimpanzees, orangutans, and great apes in status quo. And they will also be exempt of all of those other things, but the human beings will also be subject to the same laws after they display the same capacity to human beings in general. But before moving on to some arguments, let me just refute a few speciesist arguments coming from the Prime Minister. First thing he said, but they can't be dangerous like carnivores. First rebuttal. We think that because the development is slow, that you can in fact buttress yourself against those possible harms. Secondly, they can learn. Why is it that just because I'm a different species than you, that I can't abide from the same laws as someone who is other than another species, or really a dominant species? Is it smart for me, if I am intelligent, to go against a dominant species? Of course not. But third, we can adapt that, if in fact they have accelerated that process. This means that if we have the capacity to isolate it, we also have the capacity to inculcate it and develop it if you want to in fact create human and other human beings if you're afraid of using your particular dominance. But secondly, he says, well, it has to be prevented. You have to be prevented against the harms of other people. Well, because they have to remove that moral dilemma. No, we think that this is actually good for society. But third is the struggle for power. And what I don't understand, why is it inherent in human species to kill one another? We think that he might say that, well, maybe it's because of different characteristics with every single person that conflict arises. That's not true. We've already had conflicts way in the past of different characteristics, but we've learned to move on from that because of social institutions that have developed. And because in this case, because we've developed our social institutions, we can do that. Or we can start to develop them if they are absent. For that, yes.
What makes you think that in the early stages of evolution of them becoming sentient, they're able to understand the sort of values and civilizational aspects that you want?
That's why we'll develop it. In the meantime, we'll have the same rights as infants. Moving on, we think that we have tried time and time again to separate what in fact makes us human. Same skin color, the same country, religion. The result is that we have faith. So what is it that the correct, or what we think is in fact the correct way for us to assess when in fact we reciprocate human rights, which they have failed to do? Firstly, we think intelligence, or the capacity for intelligence, is good. Firstly, because it is the most commonly accepted of all. We think the common trend of society in the past is we naturally expanded because we became more accommodating. We have first world problems right now, that's why we're debating this. So I assume that we have enough resources to naturally expand it. But secondly, we think that it relates to your ability to defend a construct of rights. The rights allocation we allocate right now may be what they're doing, but may not mean or may not necessarily be right. We think in order for you to do this, we have to have another opinion to defend and have the capacity to defend their own rights. And because they have the intelligence to do so, they can do this. But third is the capacity to reciprocate it. Because simply that I understand that I have rights and you have rights as well, that you can in fact reciprocate it. In the case of chimpanzees, the reason why they don't just beat each other up and they have their own community is simply because they also know for a fact that I do have in fact my rights. I scratch your back, you scratch mine, which is why they don't just arbitrarily kill each other. They live in groups. But we think that even if they don't currently express the same intelligence, that we should still track them. Why? We have to express caution. Because we may, at the very moment, have already been harming some person who may necessarily hear the rights extension, which is exactly the same reason as to why we don't just kill fetuses in their second or their third trimester. Listen up. In states that allow abortion, they allow them in their first trimester, but we don't allow them anymore in the second or third. Why? Because their capacity to experience pain. They are intelligent. They have much more human than all of those other things, than all of those characteristics. In which time and time again, government has proven to be a failure. No thank you. And because of this, we have to err on the side of caution. Because look at what we're sacrificing here. What we sacrifice in government is maybe a few resources in research and development, and easily attainable. We have this floating risk of a species war between tigers and hyenas, but we think that much more realistically, that what is at stake here is you are excluding an entirely large population that has the capacity, and it is in fact human. And we have to side and land caution towards this. No thanks. But my second argument is the necessary benefits that do in fact accrue, even if they do in fact display that intelligence, and even if they were to have a war with humanity. It's simple. What these species do, if they achieve their full capacity to become intelligent, is they unique experiences. No one person is unique, and which is exactly why my dissenting opinions is just as valuable as yours. However, in the case of status quo, we think that we are eternally locked in the mindset of speciesism. There is only one way to morally assess what in fact an animal is, or what exactly is particularly right, and how in fact should we assess what is good or what is bad for humanity. What does this policy do? It introduces a dissenting opinion, a possible implication to our morality, which may dictate how in fact we are going to live our lives as a human race for the rest of the time as a species. That is something that is invaluable because all the other tangible things can be regained from our first world technology. But this dissenting opinion can only come out from other animals who have displayed similar intelligence or even greater intelligence than us. It is that much more unique to us, that much more invaluable. And even if it may take some wars or any of the other things that are coming out, it's worth it because it is the only way we develop as a human race.
I invite the Prime Minister to the debate stage.
The opposition has been very presumptuous, claiming for us to be, speciesism, to be a speciesist, without actually telling us why being a speciesist is bad, right? Because we believe that the sort of dominance and the sort of arguments of survivability that have been brought up wasn't tackled by another point here at all, right? Like all of these arguments that he brought up were also it's actually a very principled concession. This is how it is, right? In his speech, the leader of opposition said he would buttress the sort of genes that will develop into becoming intelligence, right? What does this imply? It implies that he will intervene into the genetic process in order for these people to be intelligent to our needs. Intelligent enough for us to be able to coexist with them. Intelligent enough for us to be able to teach, for us to be able to teach their values in order for them to coexist, right? Because that's what the assumption was all about, right? You want to talk about how it removes, you want to remove the other species' innate nature when you don't understand that the evolution of intelligence is often the same package as the evolution of emotion as well. Sentience is not only us knowing how to build a rocket, but also having the curiosity to go to space, to feel that wonder, right? This sort of detachment from emotion and intelligence is not sentience. It's basically them creating a robot in order for them to evolve in a particular way that they want. In fact, we believe they're still species, even if they want to claim that we are the species, right? Without them actually even realizing. This is sad, right? Let's talk about this idea of how they say rights are arbitrary and we can treat these dolphins as autistic children, right? First of all, dolphins are not autistic children yet, right? We're not talking about suppressing these individuals who have already evolved into sentient beings. We're talking about a species that hasn't evolved just yet. What do you do during that process? What is justified? They never even tackled that aspect. They only want to talk about how if they become intelligent and we can associate them with autistic children, we should protect them. A lot of ifs, but that actually explains to us the process and what is justified for us what is the justifiable way for us to tackle that process in the first place, right? Let's tackle this idea of benefits, right? Because they wanted to claim that there's a benefit because later on they will become sentient beings and they'll have their own opinions. Let me rephrase this, right? That means they're saying, look, we should get into conflicts with other people and other species because maybe later on we might listen to their opinions, right? Because you can see that there will be a war, there will be a struggle, and under that struggle we'll be able to coexist after long stretches of destruction. And all of these things that we believe is even more prevalent when it comes to half-evolved hominids or half-evolved sentient beings, right? I'm going to phrase my arguments into two main titles that will sound fancy. Right? First of all, I'm going to talk about the Planet of the Apes argument. The second, I'm going to talk about the barbarian and the gays, right? Don't worry, I'm going to explain that. Planet of the Apes, right? We believe the reason why human beings, especially, who have controlled animals for the entire history of evolution, should suppress evolution is because we don't want this species, really to evolve into sentient beings, to gather on the rhetoric that, hey, that species, once we were less evolved, made us their slaves, made us their cattle, made us their chickens, right? They took advantage of us, right? This sort of rhetoric is dangerous because that means these species have incited vengeance upon themselves to go against the dominant species that was once their master, right? We believe that was the very premise of the Planet of the Apes movie. When Caesar realized that, hey, human beings have been treating us like shit. Now that I've evolved my intelligence, we should do something about it. We can see that maybe there'll be a variety of ideologies when it comes to this species, right? But the rhetoric even existing, it would have a possibility of existing, we think is already harmful, right? But let's talk about the barbarian and the gates argument. And before I move on, yes.
Okay, sir. Even African Americans, we have once enslaved, we coexist just fine with them. But the fact of the matter is, we have yet to isolate what in fact is a human being.
Look, we believe that, as we wanted to clarify to us that what makes human beings arbitrary, we believe that even if it is arbitrary, that doesn't mean we cannot base things upon it. In fact, we base a lot of our legislations, a lot of our laws, based on the fact that we are distinct or even superior to animals, right? That's why we associate animal rights based on what we understand is animal rights. So there's already a distinction of hierarchy there, of the fact that we are different from animals. They can't just say it's arbitrary, we shouldn't do anything about it. But we are already basing things upon it, we don't think it's a problem, right? But let's talk about the barbarian and the gate argument, right? They wanted to proclaim that this species might in the future be able to coexist, be able to understand our civilization. But let's talk about the barbarian phenomenon, right? Let's talk about the Roman Empire. The barbarians were less culturally evolved and less technologically evolved than the Romans, right? So as a less evolved civilization, these individuals often think people who are different are people who we should be scared of. In fact, it's a very animalistic trait that cannot even be detached by the most intelligent of human beings. That's how in the past, Homo habilis, Homo erectus, all of these hominid species survive by tackling other individuals that look different to them, right? Look, they are not smart enough to know that going against the dominant species is bad as much as they like to proclaim, because these individuals have a protectionist instinct within themselves to protect their own sovereignty or to protect their own species, right? So what you have here is that you have an evolving species who might be tribal at first, evolving alongside a city, a civilization. Once they evolve, and they see that you have people on our land, you have people who are trying to impose things that are different to what we believe in, already existing in human beings. We think we'll worsen between these individuals, or between these species, right? That's how you get the barbarians attacking the Roman Empire, the Visigoths, the Britannicas, like all these individual barbarians, attacking them just because they're different. We believe this difference will be further highlighted when it's between different species. Barbarian gates is a no-no. They have to tackle that. So why is it that so far we've actually basically, right? We've talked to you, we took it by the balls. We said speciesism is good because we believe that survivability is only sustainable if we are speciesist, if we do some resolutions. They don't have to claim all of our claims were arbitrary without actually substantiating their own points with regards to why these individuals will be intelligent enough to coexist with us. They based themselves on assumptions. We didn't. We were audacious enough to argue the arguments philosophically. They need to engage.
The perfect narrative of egocentrism is what I heard from science. It is as if, ladies and gentlemen, because we have survived for 100,000 years, automatically makes us the perfect beings to rule this earth. This is what I'm going to challenge in today's debate. I'm going to take a look at humanity's dominance. I'm going to make sure and I'm going to tell you in today's debate, this is the wrong way for us to survive as a species. Second, I'm also going to prove to you later on that in fact society is much better off, but inculcating more and more types of individuals and even extending it to species, and we think we're going to protect ourselves better off. And thirdly, I'm going to take a look at the harms, and obviously your might also be inculcated in my whole speech. Let's now move on to the first, the idea of dominance. Because it is as if, ladies and gentlemen, it is assumed that the whole premise of this side of the house is that we are important because we have survived, which means that we're better than everyone else. If that's the narrative that we're going to say, then I'm going to say to you that trees are stronger than us because they have survived far better and far longer than us. That's why it's not the standard, by the way. But then let's investigate. Are we perfect beings? We say no. On the first level, we are one of the most destructive species that ever lived this planet. We have conducted more wars than ever, and in fact, at least lions have instincts, and when their tummy is full, they stop. But what do we have? We have greed, unending cycles and ending values that do not end, that immediately stops other people, and immediately takes advantage of other people. In fact, if you take a look at society today, we're not living together, we're not living happily. Our dominance have only created power structures of imbalances, and those are not good structures for us to protect. But even let's that's human interaction outside, or how we interact. But let's even take a look at ourselves. When we take a look at what we do in society, the only purpose of us when we take a look, for example, more and more things, is always about the version of utility. That's why if you take a look at our environment today, it is plunging in terms of value. You have people cutting down trees, you have people destroying mountains and all those natural resources. It is because it goes back to the same old idea, we are important, it is a saturation of our values. So if we come to take a look at it, even human beings destroy themselves, even without knowing it. It's a simple tragedy of the commons. Even though we all know it's good to protect our environment, we all do not do so. We have ideas like Kyoto Protocol, which only one country was able to fulfill. We have ideas such as, for example, this convention recently, which does not have legal ramifications for countries to follow. These are all sentiments that we echo, but not actual protections that we got in society. So if we take a look at it, have we really taken care of our world? We don't think so. Our actions speak louder than the words and the intents that side government wants to have an end debate. Then maybe it is time to rescind, or time to take into consideration whether or not our power structures are in fact correct. That's exactly what the argument of my partner was. Because when you become more inclusive, when you become more, when you have more dissenting opinions, that's what makes society better. For example, you would never, take into account the narratives of individuals living in rural areas, simply because it is the modern industry that benefits you. But once the extension of political rights have been given to these individuals in rural areas, they matter. They start becoming part of your policy. Their considerations, which are most of the time important considerations, are the one that is important. Now, why is that similar in today's debate? We think this species, whenever they're coming from, most likely have a legitimate value that we want to protect. Assuming that they will get this intelligence, we think they will speak of the narrative that is necessary for human beings to take a look at every day. So let's assume chimpanzees are the ones that we're abusing. But then our narrative has always been, we are important and we cannot speak out of it. That's why the nature has always been a utilitarian perspective, because the chimpanzee who lives in it cannot defend it at the end of the day. And therefore, we think this inclusion of species is the only thing that we must do so that we can extend this protection. Let's not take a look at the second idea in the idea of balance of rights. Because you don't have to take a look at it. Side government's only goal to this debate is the idea to survive. They never told you why it is more advantageous to become dominant, and that's the only way for you to survive. So if we can prove, ladies and gentlemen, if we can create a better society at the same time survive, then we think we win this particular debate. Why? We will survive. On the first level, because you have laws and structures that protect us from the immediate harms. Assuming, for example, we become human beings. Why am I keeping pointing at the partner? Assuming, for example, my partner becomes a human being, he will have the rational, he will have the calculus. And as we all know, we have police forces, we have the technology to prevent them from creating harms against our society. So the basic narrative is, they cannot do any harm against us, and we think the immediate response is to follow our laws. But secondly, if we even inculcate the power structures argument, the only time individuals come together and try to concede with each other is if they both respect the individual powers that we have, And this still exists. Why? Because human evolution never ended to begin with. Just because they were able to evolve and have intelligence does not mean we automatically become a weaker creature. Every day we expand ourselves through robotics. We become more empowered and defeat our natural limitations. Every day, for example, we have more capacities through bioengineering. We defeat our sicknesses and all of those things. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, we can achieve the equal amount of power that forces these species to interact with us and respect the society that we have already created before them. That's why we will survive, and that's why they will cooperate before.
You conceded that human beings are extremely destructive. We are sentient beings similar to the new species that you want to have as sentient beings. What's stopping these sentient beings from being destructive like us?
Okay, because I cannot be destructive against you. For example, my interest is destroying Malaysia. I cannot be destructive against that simply because you are from Malaysia. So our inherent interest to protect our homeland, from where we are, our inherent values, would ask us to create concessions. But since we cannot defend all of those things because we cannot speak against those, then we think that the entire value of destruction still happens on your side. Let's not take a look at the last point, on the idea of harms. We think the counter-narrative coming from the previous speaker is in fact the converse. For example, then they will be abusing us because of the previous harms. That is not true. And even if it is true, we tell you that number one, there's really reparation that occurred in our policy. We're not treating them the way you treat them. But giving them intelligence means and says that we can respect you as a human being and doesn't then create concessions with us. Even when the blacks were given rights, they did not say let's take over Washington. They said let's have more and more discussions against it so we can live in a normal life. There's room for forgiveness in our paradigm. And what's worse is your side. Because you have to realize, Madam Chair, these people, when they stop these people, they were already investigating about intelligence, which means that at the current time, there's already partial intelligence that is existent to begin with. Given that these people these beings have instinct, and these people have partial intelligence, what makes it that a revolution and this whole idea of abuse is more apparent on their side, we better know.
We believe what's important for mankind is the continuity of our species. And we are taking active measures in order to secure that continuity. What they are doing here is that they are leaving it to chance. There's a very real possibility under their proposal that mankind's fate will be, in the end, the demise of the entire species. We think even allowing the slightest possibility of it happening is inherently immoral for us as human beings to allow it to perpetuate. I have three issues in my speech today. Firstly, I'm going to examine whether is speciesism bad. Secondly, I'm going to examine the existence of the power structure and how exactly it's not going to work out on their way. And thirdly, I'm going to talk about what is exactly best for mankind. First argument, is speciesism bad? Because when Habib first came here to this debate, he brought up this argument that dominance is evolution. Natural selection selects the best among a species. And this one species at the top of the food chain dictates what other species do around them. In fact, human being now, in fact, actually utilizes resources that we have in our own life. The criteria for our dominance is not merely the continuity, but the criteria for our dominance is the fact that we can survive, but also the fact that we have the capacity to utilize all of these other species and these resources. Hence, that argument, no, trees are not more superior than But when it comes to speciesism back, they never really told you why exactly is speciesism bad. Because they wanted to fight this biodiversity. They want to have more and more sentient beings in our world. But our analysis so far has proven a very real chance, a very real possibility of these species posing a threat to us as human beings. Let us visit the evolutionary history of our species, for example. Back to a times when Homo sapiens wasn't alone. We have Homo neanderthals, Homo habilis, Homo erectus living alongside Homo sapiens. In fact, these different species of humans battle out with each other in very different tribes. But why exactly that Homo sapiens survived when Homo neanderthals did not? Because we managed to utilize our intelligence. While Homo neanderthals was physically superior, our intelligence was better. We managed to pool our resources and outlive Homo neanderthals. The fact that our own capacity to utilize our advantage asserts our dominance, give us the right to dominance over all other species in this world. Hence, which is why we are saying that speciesism is not really bad, nor is it really good. It's just the natural order of things. And our proposal is going along that natural order of things. And they are disrupting that and threatening our existence 100 or million years in the future. And we think that is inherently immoral. But sit down. Let's move on to the second issue, the existence of this power structure. Because they considered that sentient beings like humans possess this kind of greed for more. And we think that sentient beings actually, even though they are not humans, will actually compete us for more power. Look, at the early stage of this new species development as a species, maybe they might not compete us because they realize they cannot even possibly battle against like 7 billion of us at one time. But over time, as their intelligence develop and their dominance and their numbers improve, there is a very real possibility of them realizing, hey, we are not very inferior to them now, by that much inferior compared to them. We possess the same kind of level of intelligence. Numerically, we may be able to compete with them. Hence, under that proposal alone, the threat exists, and we think humans have a moral duty to them. Hence, when you come to the power structure, if you recognize that power structure they want more from this God, blessed earth, I guess. Yes.
Yeah, we agree. We fight every day. But in journals, in academics, in all discussions that are relevant and non-harmful to each other, we talk as if automatically just because you're an animal, that's what you do. But we were animals before and we expressed it in sports. Why can't we not do the same?
No, the difference between that is that we developed as a species, we evolved as a species alone on a single planet, whereby nobody else is intellectually superior than us. But if you take into account on how they're going to develop, they're going to develop and initially subservient to human beings. And this is where Zim's argument comes into being, because this species know for a fact that they used to be subservient to human beings. They will have this kind of historical rage going on against them, and then they eventually feel threatened. They're going to say that look, this is good for this cause. Look, this cause is only going to happen after conflicts that will happen. As a human being, why should we actually allow this conflict to happen in the first place? And we talked about the moral justification behind this proposal, because precisely we do not want to kill a being with the same moral character as human beings. We suppress this and stop them before they gain that level of sentience. Killing them right now is more moral than killing them later on. But let's go to the third issue. What exactly is best for mankind? Because the characteristic of dominance and evolution, characteristic of dominance is equal, in fact, to evolution. There are always going to be changes in the universe. There may be some real threat in the world, there may be some real threat, but humankind will be shaken off its throne of existence. And under that very real threat, what do you suppose humankind should do? Should we allow the very real possibility of that threat even existing in the first place? Should we allow the threat existing with the slightest possible benefits that can only be accrued later on, eons in the future? We don't think so. This biodiversity that they want to talk about, even if it's going to exist, it's not justified at all. Because it's going to come at the cost of the entire